Well, it's pretty exciting because we worked on this movie for 4 years.
When James Cameron came to you and said, look, I've got this movie idea and I have some innovations and some things that I want to talk to you about creating, what were the first thoughts that ran through your mind?
Well, the first thing was Jim sent me the treatment that he wrote for the movie about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you come right from Lord of the Rings into Avatar?
King Kong. We were finishing
King Kong.
when I got the call about, can you think about doing Avatar next?
So you went from a giant ape to blue aliens.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that made it interesting. We actually started to talk to Jim as we were finishing Lord of the Rings right after we finished, and we were talking to him about King Kong just in the way that you do about what we're trying to do next and what the film is. And so I think he was interested in that because as it relates to Avatar, we were creating another character that had to carry a performance, on his own. Even though Kong didn't have dialogue, he had scenes that he had to carry. We were building this big virtual world, and of course the jungle was relevant in what we were learning about how to create, those kinds of elements. And so in a way it was all sort of relevant, but then Jim said, okay, can you put it all together? Can we just create this whole world with this whole tribe of people, and they all have speaking parts, and just basically no holds barred. Yeah.
And what were some of the ways that you made it comfortable for the actors and not alter the integrity of the effect?
Well, ultimately we tried to keep it as lightweight as possible, so building a head rig that was molded to their heads, making materials that were as lightweight as possible, working with only one camera, even though multiple cameras would have been technically easier to work with. And a lot of those physical innovations came down to Glenn Derry, who was one of our on-set supervisors who worked with all that and worked a lot of that stuff out. For the facial camera, there were a lot of components to it. A lot of people did work on it because it was hardware and software, but yeah, basically my job was to take all these ideas and to try to figure out what we needed to do to make it happen. So we wrote a lot of custom software for it. We worked on the design. We put everything together to make it work. Down to just making sure it's comfortable for the actors, that they could perform for days on end in this system. There's so many factors that go into it that you don't think about, but it all comes down to wanting to not encumber the performance so that you can really capture that.
So you not only worked with the visual effects people, but you actually worked with life cast people and creating the molds and different artists. And
sure, but that's always been traditionally part of visual effects, so we were just able to adapt it here to the process that we needed on stage.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to see you.
You took a dinner break and now you're here with us again.
Yes.
And with a few members of your team. What went into developing the skin and the skin tone?
This is the man.
There was a lot of we looked at the characters as their counterparts. So we tried to make Neytiri's skin feel as much like Zoe's skin as possible. We did a lot of photographic reference, really down to the pore level, just looking at what makes the skin up, the oiliness of the skin, how light penetrates the skin, and also because the characters were blue, we had a little bit of figuring out to do to make that still feel fleshy, right? Because you need warmth in the characters to be able to kind of accept them, and that was the tricky part of doing with blue skin, trying to make sure that you still got the sense of the blood, that you saw that her face was flushed when she was angry.
Were you working with like an undertone of color to try to get that warmth out of the blue?
That's exactly right. That's how we came up with the solution, was to work with sort of an undertone of like sort of warmish pink colors in the blue and in the blood, and you can especially see it in the backlighting and
Interesting.
Yeah.
Something that I'm really curious about that I wanted to ask you and I didn't before was working with creating the character in combination with the motion capture suit. What are the challenges or how does that enhance the animation? of a character?
Well, what we tried to do was to get the performance of the actors and actresses really as directly as possible. But because you're putting them on a character that's not exactly human, there's some interpretation that's involved, right? You have to determine that, you know, the body's a different size, the arms and legs are different, the face is slightly different. What does it mean to actually capture that performance? So even though there's a lot of technology behind the scenes to enable that transfer, there's really a lot of artistic decisions that you have to make day to day to really make sure you've got it. Ultimately, it just comes down to a gut feeling.